Oh my God. Let's try that again. I have built a $12 million real estate / Airbnb portfolio, and when I started, I had very little money, and the main strategy that I used to scale up my portfolio was OPM, other people's money. And by the way, today's video is the final video in this 3-part series. If you remember, the series has actually covered quite a bit. How to go from $0 to $10,000 a month on Airbnb, how to use OPP, other people's property, to scale your portfolio, to today's video talking about OPM, other people's money, and how to use it to supercharge your portfolio. We've covered so much in this series, and the whole goal for it was to help transform you from a short-term rental zero to a short-term rental hero. And I'm so excited to talk you through the strategies that helped me build this $12 million portfolio. And just a little side note, we are working on penning a deal right now that will actually take my portfolio from $12 million to $24 million, but I don't want to talk about it any more than that because every time I do, things don't work out. But just know that there are a few things in the works, some irons in the fire, if you will, and I will be using other people's money to obtain this new property that I'm working on. Okay, so let's jump into today's video. But before we do, I'm so excited to announce it's Black Friday, and I've got a special Black Friday deal for you. It's a really encompassing deal for all of you that want to use other people's property and other people's money and other people's land to build your Airbnb portfolio. So if you want to learn about this Black Friday deal, I'm going to leave a link in the description down below. So go click that link to go to my website and I'll tell you all about it. All right, let's get into it. So let's get into some of these strategies here. And you know, I get a lot of flack from people that are like, oh, well, you started when it was easy and all that kind of stuff. And I just want to say that the strategies I'm going to walk you through today are the same exact strategies that I'm using in 2023, going into 2024. I didn't invent any new groundbreaking ideas. I'm just consistent as hell. And this has all just worked for me. And when something works, I just keep doing it over and over and over again. All right. So let's back up a little bit and talk about how I got my accidental start in real estate, because it will provide some context as to like my thinking and my philosophies. So out of college, I got a job in Kansas City. I was a copywriter at an ad agency, and I was writing for Gatorade. That ad agency's headquarters was in Kansas City. So I moved out to Kansas City and I rented an apartment, and it was like a 800 square foot apartment, and it was $850 a month. And I remember living there with my wife and saying, man, I can't bear paying a landlord rent, and they get all the upside, and I get this tiny little apartment. And I was like, let's buy a house and let's be house poor. And my wife was like, okay, yeah, sure, if you think we can afford it. I was like, I don't think we can, but I think that it's better than living in this apartment. And so we didn't actually have the money to buy a house, but that year in particular, we got a $6,000 tax refund. And that was all the money that we had in our savings account. And I was like, let's do it. Let's use that to buy a house. So somehow with this money and very shoddy credentials, we were able to qualify for a house. And we actually bought our first house for $159,000. The mortgage on that was $1,059 a month. I remember this number very, very clearly. And we were house poor, okay? So we had enough money to pay the mortgage and not really much more than that. Around that time, I had a friend who was thinking about moving to Kansas City. And I said, dude, why don't you move here? I'll help you get a job at my agency and you can live in my house. I'll charge you $400 a month, all bills paid. And he was like, great, let's do it. He moved into my house, and I remember he Venmoed me that first $400, and I was like, oh my God, I'm rich, baby. And I didn't understand this at the time, but that was a house hack. House hacking is effectively the idea of renting a room or a space or a basement or a murder closet in your home, and you use that money to subsidize your overall mortgage. At that time, I was just trying to make an extra $400, right? I didn't know that there was like a fancy term for this. I say this because I house hacked for so many years after that, and that whole idea and philosophy and strategy really was a catalyst for all the wealth I've ever built, okay? So I just want you to know that if you have a house, don't be too proud to rent out a room or a space in there, right? Like, I think that's a really great way to get started in real estate. And for a lot of you watching this right now, you're like, oh, I hadn't even considered that. Or, oh, I've been telling my husband that we need to do this, or I've been telling my wife that I need to do this, but they won't listen to me. Well, show them this video and said, Rob said to rent out a room in your house, dang it, okay? So we had this house, making an extra $400 a month, and we were kind of done living in Kansas City. We loved our time there, but we felt like we needed something more. And so we decided to list this house for sale. And this house had appreciated from $159,000 to $215,000. You know, I didn't know that I should have kept it as a rental at that time. I wasn't all in on real estate at that point. I didn't really know about real estate all that much. It was really around this time that I started finding out about bigger pockets, kind of funny enough, which was back in 2016. So we made this mistake of selling our house But as a result, we had 40,000 bucks in our bank account, and we decided to move to a much cheaper city than Kansas City, AKA LA. Real smart choice to move to a significantly more expensive city there. And it was kind of funny because my wife was like, should we consider using that $40,000 to pay off $40,000 of our student loans? And I was like, no, we shouldn't consider that, babe. I don't know why, it was obviously the smart thing to do, and she was totally right. I just felt like I needed this money for something, I didn't know what, and I'm so glad that we kept it because we held on to this money, and eventually that money, which to me at that point was like house money because I couldn't even comprehend that our house went up that much in value, and it kind of felt like pretend money anyways, but that ended up being the down payment for the house that we eventually went on to buy in Los Angeles. Now, before we bought that house in Los Angeles, we had rented an apartment, and that apartment was $1,850 a month, and it was 666 square feet. The Lord's number. I don't know why they couldn't just say it was 665 or 667 square feet, but they were like brutally honest, and we were like, well, what could possibly go wrong here? So we move into an apartment paying $1,850 to live in a shoebox basically, and I remember having that same conversation with my wife and saying, babe, I can't imagine paying $1,850 to a landlord and not getting anything out of this. What if we bought a house in LA? We've got $40,000 in the bank. That's about enough to put 3.5% down on a cheap house here in LA, cheap, which ended up being 624,000 bucks, by the way, a very cheap house in LA at that time. And so she kind of trusted me and she said, yeah, sure, let's do it. But then she asked, well, what are we gonna do with this apartment? And I said, well, I had heard about this weird concept where if you put your apartment on the internet, people will pay you every night to sleep in it. And obviously that was Airbnb at that time, but this is 2017. I was like, so we'll just list it on Airbnb and see how it goes. And this was really the beginnings of our first arbitrage unit. So we buy a house for $624,000. The mortgage is $4,400, and it had this 279 square foot studio apartment underneath. And I had been looking into Airbnb, and I looked at other people's calendars, and I had calculated that if I rented this apartment for $7,500 a night, I could pay 50 to 75% of my mortgage, which is exactly what happened. I was making like $2,000 or $3,000 a month, and on top of that, that apartment that we were living in, we were arbitraging that, and we were making like $1,000 to $2,000 a month on that property. And so when you combine both of those, I was living mortgage free. I was living mortgage free, yeah, in New York. You know what I mean? I was living mortgage free. I was living mortgage free in my dream home in LA, and I was just happy to be living the dream with my wife. We're doing this thing, and I'm like really just high on life, like that this Airbnb thing could actually make me like thousands of dollars every single month. And I go to my really good friend at that time, and I say, dude, you are not gonna believe this. There's this thing called Airbnb, and you can rent out apartments and you can re-rent them on Airbnb. And if you do this, like we can make like $1,000 or $2,000 a month. Can you believe this? And he was like, I can't believe this, but you seem very excited, weird man. How can I help you? And I was like, well, I don't have any money, but I'm pretty good at this. Like I'm figuring it out. I've been doing it for a few months. If you front the expenses for like the furnishings and the first month's rent and the last month's rent, I'll help you launch this, and we can do this together. We'll partner up and we'll start a little business together. And he's like, great, tell me where to sign. So this right here is two concepts in one. It's partnering with someone else, and it's also using other people's money. Now, in this instance, this partner didn't have the experience or the know-how on how to start an Airbnb business, but I did. He had the capital, I had the time. We were a perfect union. At the same time, I went to my other best friend. I was like, dude, you're not gonna believe this. We're making $2,000 a month over here. You gotta get in on this. And he was like, let's do it. So then I went and raised money from another friend who funded that apartment. And then same thing, that unit started printing money too. And I was going back and forth to these partners and explaining them how it works. And I was like, guys, what if we all just combine together? I'll dilute my share so that it's equal for everyone. So we end up combining, and we're like, okay, rental arbitrage, it's cool, but it's not really the most sustainable business. Like it's a 12-month lease. Once the lease is over, the business is over. So what else can we do to actually like build some kind of real business here? So we had come up with a brilliant and original idea of buying a property. And I didn't have the money, my other partner didn't have the money, but my other partner did have the money, and he fronted about $80,000 so that we could buy a $279,000 condo in Austin, Texas. This was a huge moment for me because this is the first time that I got a free house. I was able to go and find a partner, raise the money through them to go and buy a property and get into a unit that effectively cost me $0. This was a huge deal for me at the time, and an indication that, you know, maybe if I'm passionate and I care about my business and I show people that I'm good at this, maybe they'd be willing to give me money. And that's exactly what happened. So around this time, why does this keep happening? Why does this keep happening? I don't know if that will make the final edit, to be honest. It would look really embarrassing if Caleb didn't edit that at all to be funny. Where were we, by the way? Oh, right. So around this time, I'm just thinking like, how can I start more Airbnbs? Like they're working, I'm making $1,000 here, $2,000 here. I'm owning this property over here and that's making like $2,000 a month. And so thinking about this in my backyard, this is how I remember it. And I remember thinking, wow, I have such a large backyard. What if I just added another Airbnb in my backyard? And so that's exactly what I ended up doing. I ended up building a tiny house, an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit in my backyard in LA. And I went out and took out a loan to fund most of it. And then I ran out of money there and I used credit cards to fund the rest. And at that time I was going into debt and I thought all debt was bad and I thought I was dumb. But what I didn't know at that time was that I was still using OPM. I was still using other people's money. I was using the bank's money who gave me the loan. I was using the credit card company's money that gave me the credit line that I used to finish that property. And so what ended up happening there is I built this tiny house in my backyard and I forced appreciation on that property and my property value went up pretty significantly. And when it did, I then went to the bank and I said, hey bank, my property is worth more now. Can I do a cash out refi and pull that money out? And they were like, sure thing, sir. Or by the way, are you raw built? I'm just kidding. I hadn't started a channel at that point, but they were like, sure thing, sir. So I got an appraisal. My house appraised for a lot more than I paid for it. And I was actually able to cash out money and then pay off the debt that I used to build the tiny house. And that's when it kind of clicked with me where I was like, dang, banks just basically allowed me to get a free house. And so I kind of thought to myself like, all right, I just cobbled together this deal and it somehow worked. How could I do this again? Because by the way, free houses are dope. And that's when I had the brilliant idea to build another tiny house. And I started thinking, well, all right, Zillow.com. I'm gonna start looking for land in Los Angeles. And I was like, oh, there's all this cheap land in Los Angeles. And eventually I found out when land is super cheap in Los Angeles, it's because it's on a cliffside and it would cost like $200,000-$300,000 to even just build the foundation and all that land was garbage. So I kept zooming out on Zillow and I found this little town called Joshua Tree. And I had heard about Joshua Tree was like this cool artsy musical community with like cool desert quirk and all that kind of stuff. And it was a getaway, a weekend getaway for all the people in Los Angeles. And so I told myself, I think I'm gonna build here. So I thought, how much could land possibly cost in Joshua Tree? It turned out $12,500. So I bought this land in Joshua Tree. And at the same time, I was window shopping on Airbnb to just see what other properties were out there. And I realized that there were these teepees out there that were charging like $150 a night. They were booked a year in advance and they were making like $50,000 a year. And I was so angry because I wasn't making $50,000 a year off of a freaking $5,000 teepee. And so at this time, I text my partners. I'm like, dudes, we need to put a tent out in the middle of the desert immediately because these guys are making 50,000 and we're not. And they were like, all right, man, if you say so. And I was like, great, I'm buying this $3,000 tent. And I used the money that we had been saving up in our bank account to do that. And I bought a $3,000 tent. But the problem is we didn't own land. And we didn't have money to buy land. So what did I do? I went to Craigslist and I typed in like, I will rent your land. I want to put this tent on your land and rent it on Airbnb and I'll pay you a percentage of revenue every single month if you let me run my business here. Then I got like 30 responses from people and I was like, what? And I called the first one or two and actually struck a deal very, very quickly. And the lesson here was I didn't even need to own the land. I could just rent someone else's land. And this was new to me. I was like, wow, I had been building my business by using other people's property with arbitrage. And then I continued to build it and get into a free house by using other people's money in partnerships. And then I use other people's land to continue to build my cash flow on Airbnb. Stop. Then I ended up launching my first tent. In the 3 years that that tent ran, I think we grossed $142,000. Then we launched another tent and then a bigger tent and then an Airstream and then an A-frame. This glamping thing, Glamorous Camping by the way, in case you don't know, was crazy, it was popping off. And around this time, I'm also building my second tiny house in Joshua Tree, California. And I used my home equity line of credit that I actually had from my LA house because I forced the appreciation there. The bank gave it to me. And I used that home equity line of credit to fund the majority of Casa Conejo. And I needed about another $37,000 to finish that job. And I went and raised it from the best version of OPM ever, my mom and dad. And this is where everyone's like, trust fund, baby. I knew it. I knew you were rich. Okay, yeah, nah, it's not exactly that. Well, first of all, my parents are immigrants from Mexico. My dad was a doctor in Mexico. My mom had a great job and they gave all that up to move to America and build a life for me and my family. And I was always very grateful for that. So I could have found that $37,000 in other places, but what I wanted to do was build a property that could provide them income every month. And so my purpose for raising OPM for my parents was like, hey, if you guys kick in 37,000 bucks, I'll make you 50-50 partners on this house. And they're like, great, son, let's do it. And a really cool story, I've paid back their investment, and I just wired my mom 2,500 bucks, and I wire her money all the time, and it's awesome. I give them most, if not all, of profits of Casa Conejo, and that is the greatest investment they've ever made. Me, I'm the greatest investment they've ever made. But in all seriousness, that's why I do this, and it's been a really cool full circle moment for me to give that to them. So mom and dad, if you're watching, I love you. Who's cutting onions in here? Next! So fast forward, and I end up building Casa Conejo, and I don't use any of my own money to build that. And I go and I get an appraisal from the bank, and it appraises for $233,000. And if you do the math there, I got 75% of that. So 233,000 times 0.75. I got $174,750 back from the bank. Now, after all my closing costs and escrow and taxes and everything, I got $165,000 back in my pocket, which I used to pay off my home equity line of credit, parents, all that good stuff. And again, I got a 100% free house without using any money of my own, AKA other people's money. And I'm talking about this journey on social media, and I'm not an influencer at this point, by the way. I'm not a content creator. I don't have a YouTube channel, just a regular dude working an advertising job. But I'm posting like my success and my story, and I'm just trying to show my passion for this stuff, right? I joined an improv school in Los Angeles called UCB, and we're going around in a circle, and everyone's introducing themselves, giving like fun facts and all that stuff. And the teacher's like, what do you do? And I'm like, I invest in Airbnbs on the side. And everyone's like, why are you here, dude? We're all trying to be actors, man. Like we're all like, this doesn't make sense. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm so sorry. I don't want to be a poor actor, you know what I mean? I want to go and build real estate. No, don't show any of that. That's all dumb. Okay, I go and I do a show with this class. And after the show, we go to a bar to celebrate. And one of the people that was sitting in that circle said, hey, I really like that real estate stuff you were talking about. And I was like, yeah? And he was like, yeah, man. He's like, I want to learn how to do exactly what you do. I've got a really great paying job. I've got some money saved up. He's like, I'll fund this investment if you teach me how to do this. And I was like, really? And he was like, heck yeah, man, this sounds awesome. I was like, free house alert, free house alert. And I was like, fantastic. And so I was like, well, I mean, I'm in Joshua Tree, so why not just keep that going? I just got a free house there. So I go and I buy another piece of land. I build another house for $275,000. This house is Casa Mariposa, for those of you that have followed the channel. And we ended up selling that house for $670,000, which is about a $400,000 profit. That business partner has gone on to build so many other amazing houses in Joshua Tree. Pretty sure he makes 6 figures doing that. And we're still partners to this day on other properties and always scheming and dreaming and figuring out what else we can build together. So again, $400,000 profit using none of my own money. So I'm hoping that at this point, you're hearing this story and you're saying, oh yeah, there is no crazy strategy here. Rob just went and he raised money. You can do this, whether there's a recession, a global downturn, whether things are amazing, when interest rates are 18%, 8%, 3%, it doesn't matter. Raising money from other people is a strategy that has existed for many years. It will always exist no matter what's happening in the world. That's exactly why I said at the beginning of this that this is the same strategy that I'm doing every day. I'm raising money from other people, okay? So I'm posting about this house, and then I had some friends reach out on Instagram and they said, hey, Rob, you seem pretty good at this Airbnb thing. Can you show us how to do it? Married couple. And I was like, yeah, of course. I was like, tell you what, I'll just help you out as a friend and you can ask me questions. Option 1. Option 2 is we just partner and I teach you how to do this. And if you want to partner with me again, you can, or you can just go buy other houses after this without me if you want. And they were like, let's do that. And I was like, really? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, you could just ask me questions for free. Like as a friend, I'm happy to help you. And then they were like, no, let's just partner up. And I was like, awesome. So we go and we buy a chalet in the Smoky Mountains in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and they put up the cash for that. That was the arrangement. It was 50-50. And the idea was they would get paid back first before I ever got a dime of my money back. And then they got paid back pretty much at the end of year 1, which was pretty cool. We had this property now that was making anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 a month, depending on seasonality. And again, another free house. And we bought that house for $324,000. And in the few years that we've owned it, that house has probably gone up another $300,000 in value, which is cool. So working hard on this property, managing it, putting in the sweat equity, not really ever getting paid for this property. In the short term, right, that's how it feels. But in the long term, I've basically added $150,000 to my net worth. Again, using OPM? That's right. Now, I do want to say that when you're using other people's property, it's not just some cavalier thing and it's like, oh, if I'm just going to use it. Like, you're on the hook for all this, right? You're working with investors. It's a serious deal to be handling other people's money. So make sure that you're always being investor forward and you're always thinking of the investor first. That's how you always have to think about this kind of stuff. So that house leads into a whole frenzy of buying other houses with other investors and splitting the ownership of those houses 50-50 and having those investors fund the deal. And me and my business partner did that several times. And then eventually we went on to buy a 20-unit motel and doubled the size of our portfolio overnight. This is one that we bought about a year and a half, 2 years ago, doing renovations on it, and light at the end of the tunnel. We're actually, they're gonna be beautiful. They're like so beautiful now. Oh my gosh, like we're about to raise rents on this thing and really just blow this one out the water. But it's one of those projects that hasn't been super easy for us. It hasn't been super easy to manage it, find labor, find materials, all that kind of stuff. But we've been sticking it out. So finally I've got progress on that motel and I'm so excited to share more once it's done. Then fast forward a little bit and then I just launched 3 rental arbitrage units in the last 3 months using a 0% interest credit card. Again, other people's money, not mine, the bank's money, because it's a 0% interest. I mean, I had the money to do it, but I was like, I mean, if it's 0% interest, like why not just do that? It's free money, right? And so now I'm mixing 2 things, other people's money, other people's property. It's a beautiful marriage when you can use them correctly, right? You'll hear a lot of people say like, oh, use business credit and all that kind of stuff. I think there's a lot of false things about business credit and stuff that I hear gurus like spouting all the time, and I was like, all right, sure. But if you utilize the right credit cards and the right companies, like you can totally fund an arbitrage unit. I did. And yeah, those units can bring in anywhere from $1,000 on the really low side to $2,800. But really the average is about $1,500 of cash flow per unit. So I've got 3 that are on average making about $4,500 a month, which is really, really cool. So even though I own a bunch of property now, I'm always still working on building up my cash flow, which is why I've gotten a little bit back into the arbitrage space, mostly just to teach y'all how to do it. I'm also co-hosting and running their day-to-day and getting a 20% fee to manage their property for them. And so we fast forward to today and where I'm at now, and I'm currently working to pen the biggest deal of my career, which is a $12 million 24 unit development on the East Coast. And we're gonna be raising about $2 million to get that deal done. And if I can raise that money and close this deal, I'll be a 50% owner of this building, doubling my overall portfolio value using other people's money. I really wish that we could have done like a drinking game. We take a shot every time I say OPM or other people's money. But it just goes to show you like how I've scaled. That's really the idea for this video, is arbitrage to building a house, to refining and getting my money back, to partnering with other people and business partners, to raising money from investors and partnering on those houses, to raising like millions of dollars for giant developments. Like I say this in a very oversimplistic way, and I hope that you understand that this has been years. Like this has been the last 7 years of my life, all the gray hairs you see here, lost hours of sleep and stressful evenings and crazy guests and all that kind of stuff, right? It hasn't been hard, but it's been hard work. And that's what Airbnb is. If you're willing to grind it out and be consistent and put in time and effort into this thing, you can build something special. And you don't need to own land. You don't need to own property. It's a lot easier if you come in with money and you can buy property. But believe me when I say that you can scale a multi-million, double-decker million portfolio, even if you're starting with $0. And there are a lot of people out there that will say, well, Rob, you got in when interest rates are low, and excuses. Freaking excuses, all right? If that's your attitude about real estate, this is not the business for you. It's always gonna be hard, because guess what? The same people that are complaining about me getting in when interest rates were low were the same people that were complaining that there were 80 offers on a single property. That's your attitude. You've got a losing mindset. Figure out how to get into the game and adapt. I'm adapting every single day. I'm using creative finance. I'm getting 3% interest rates on houses that I'm buying. I promise you there are ways to do this kind of stuff, all right? And if you like this video and if you wanna learn how to do this, all you have to do is hit the like button and the subscribe button, and I will teach you how to do it every single week. And if you really wanna learn how to do this, then don't forget to check out my Black Friday offer, where I will teach you all of this, because I'm bundling my masterclass, my blueprint and a bunch of really cool stuff, and it's all in one beautiful package with the bow on it, and I'm gonna teach you how to scale your Airbnb business, because that's what I like to do, all right? So thanks for watching today's episode of Rob Built. I hope you got some value from it. I hope I taught you something, and I hope I at least got you thinking, maybe I can do this. You know why? Because I did it, and just a regular guy. Cool? All right, everybody. Good night. It is 10:55 p.m. Been a while since I've done a late video like this, so I'm gonna go get some rest. Catch you guys on the next episode of Rob Built. Bye.